Unbearable Cross. Will God ever place more pain, suffering, or obligation on His children than they can bear? By John D. Bain. Copyright 2014 by Other Little Ships. This work is dedicated to Dr. John W. Hamilton, my father in the ministry, of whom God required everything and more. Paul the Apostle in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8. I don't want you to be unaware of the terrible trouble that I found myself in while we were in Asia. We were crushed with a pressure that can't even be measured. It was greater than our strength. We wished that we could die. Chapter 1, Introduction. The premise of this book may at casual glance seem to be a very gloomy one that might not lure a reader to invest valuable reading time. Books about Christian prosperity, success, happiness, health, healing, and well-being abound. The fact is, that's what we all really want to hear and read about. But when our faith is so different from our experience, the adversary is able to prod us to doubt God and to doubt His Word. Does the Bible promise anyone immunity from the difficulties and trials of the human condition? Does it promise impunity? That we won't get sick, hurt, or injured? Does God promise that there are spiritual or scriptural secrets that one might invoke that can prevent or heal cancer, heart disease, or other physical or mental maladies? We won't break our bones. We won't die. No, I do not believe that God has ever promised or guaranteed anyone that kind of freedom from human frailty or flaws on this earthly plane. To the contrary, the Scriptures seem to guarantee us a life that runs headlong into trouble and tribulation. In the world you shall have tribulation, Jesus said in John 16:33. As a result of the fall, man's disobedience in the Garden of Eden, humanity bears a curse that manifests death in all of its horrendous forms. Does this mean that our God is weak or miserly? Does this mean that our faith is worthless? That there's no power, there's no victory? Are we deluded? Mistaken? No, we just need to remind ourselves that we are people of the cross. Our symbol and emblem is an executioner's tool. We need to remember that the greatest work that God ever performed happened on a cursed tree. That's what we're really all about, and there is the true victory. Chapter 2, More Than We Can Bear. And as the soldiers led Jesus away, they grabbed a bystander named Simon, who was just visiting the city from the country of Cyrene. They forced this man to carry Jesus' cross for him because it was more than he could bear. Luke 23:26. Sometimes God places more upon His servants, more upon His children than they can bear, more than they can carry, more than they can possibly survive. The greatest example of this is found in Luke 23:26. Jesus collapsed with weariness and exhaustion under the weight of His cross as He was led down the Via Dolorosa, the street of suffering. It was too heavy for Him to carry in His weakened physical state. The burden of the wooden crossbeam crushed Him to the ground. Simon the Cyrenian was compelled to bear it for Him. And even though Jesus endured the suffering of the cross, Hebrews 12:2, He did not survive it. His life was not taken from Him. He willingly laid it down. But we must never lose sight of the fact that the death of the cross was the height of human suffering and humiliation. Complete and total destruction of His human life. Ultimate defeat that concluded and included utter rejection. We must never view the resurrection that followed as taking away any of the burden or the horror of the cross. The resurrection of Jesus is not the undoing of the cross. It's not a reversal of the anguish of Calvary. It's a completely separate work of grace in the divine plan. Sometimes in His grace, the Father asks us to make the ultimate sacrifice, just like Jesus did, just like He did Jesus. Give everything, even life. No one has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends, Jesus said. You are my friends. John 15, verses 13 and 14a. I once thought that here in this verse, Jesus was again telling His disciples that He would soon be giving His life for them. And of course He was, but that's not all. He was also telling them that He was their friend. And He was teaching them that they were His friends. All of these men, of course Judas had already departed from them, all of these men would be called upon to lay down their lives for Him. All of these 11 apostles would, according to the church tradition, lay down their lives as Christian martyrs, with the exception of John, the son of Zebedee. Jesus had already made cross-bearing a part of the calling for all disciples. Mark 8:34. Did we only understand this as dragging some burden or duty or responsibility around through our lives in the name of Jesus? Or should we have included an understanding that He meant that we might be asked to shoulder something that would be so terribly heavy that its weight would grind us to powder beneath it? Or that we might be called to endure something that was so horrible that it would literally kill us? He did tell us to count the cost that we required to follow Him, Luke 14:28. I don't think that we have taken this part of our calling seriously or understood it clearly.